Hello, I'm Eric Corman, CEO at League of Education Voters and the parent of a high school junior of the global majority in the public school system who is accessing special education services. I advocate because of my son, so that every student can get what they need, when they need it, and how they need it. This webinar features closed captions. To access captioning, just click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. Spanish interpretation is also available. To access this webinar in Spanish, in your webinar controls in the bottom of your screen, click Interpretation, which is the icon that looks like a globe, and then click Spanish. If you want to hear only Spanish without the original English in the background, click Mute Original Audio. Special thanks to Claudia Azar, who is our interpreter. If you have any technical issues, feel free to use the chat function, which is something that I will monitor throughout the webinar. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to create learning environments where every Washington student feels safe, supported, and a positive sense of belonging so that they can achieve academically and access the life they choose. Our website is educationvoters.org. We believe that education is a tool for justice. One of the systems that perpetuate racial and disability injustice experienced by global majority communities is our schools. We believe every child deserves an excellent public education that provides equitable opportunities for success. In order to achieve this, we must pursue radical change in our school systems for equity, justice, and liberation. We must build schools and systems that honor the humanity in every student. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 12 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's webinar is about what to expect in the Washington State legislative session in 2026. The budget deficits that Washington State is facing, in addition to the uncertainty of federal funding in the coming years, could devastate many programs and services critical to the well-being of our students. In the 2026 legislative session, we must prioritize student needs by ensuring equitable access to the essential school supports, such as mental health resources, special education services, and post-secondary opportunities. Students of color, students with disabilities, students gaining English proficiency, students experiencing homelessness, and other historically marginalized by school systems face the greatest risks and bear the deepest burdens of inequities caused by funding shortfalls. In today's webinar, League of Education Voters Chief Policy Officer Jacob Vela and Government Relations Consultant Carey Morris, along with partners of League of Education Voters, will give an overview of the 2026 legislative landscape, outline priorities for the 2026 legislative session, and answer your questions. And now I would like our panelists to introduce yourselves, starting with Pari. Pari, feel free to popcorn to whoever you like.
Hello, my name is Pri. I'm the Office of Public Affairs Director at LIAC, and I also serve as the co-chair for the Bellevue Youth Link Board, ensuring that students' voices on the city and state level are represented. And I'll popcorn this to Ananya.
Hi, my name is Ananya Swaminathan, and I go to Redmond High School. I'm a senior, and I'm also part of the Washington Legislative Youth Advisory Council, and I work under Puri in the Office of Public Affairs. And I'll pass this on to Andrea.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrea Cadlick with Disability Rights Washington, and I will pass it to Dr. Boyd.
Good afternoon. My name is Soleil Boyd, she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director at the Children's Alliance. I'll pass it along to Carey Morris.
Thank you, Carey Morris. I'm the contract lobbyist for League of Education Voters, and it's an honor to represent them in this space. And I'll pass it to Aaron.
Hey everyone, my name is Aaron Yared. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Building Changes. And I will pass it to Fernando.
Hi everyone. This is Fernando Mejia Ledesma, he, him, él, and I am the campaign director for Communities for Our Colleges, which is the student center multiracial coalition, the statewide coalition focusing on advancing equity and racial justice for our community and technical college students. I'll pass it now to Ruben.
Thank you. My name is Ruben Flores. I am the executive director of the Council of Presidents. We're an association of the 6 public baccalaureate universities in the state, and I am happy to be here. I'll pass it to Terry.
Ruben, thank you so much. I am Terry Standish-Kuan, using she, her pronouns, and it's my pleasure to work with the students and campuses that are the private not-for-profit colleges and universities in Washington.
Well, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Jacob, that's right. We need to get to you.
Hi, I'm Jacob Vela. I am he, him. I am the Chief Policy Officer at the League of Education Voters.
Great. To begin today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded traditional lands of the 29 federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes in Washington state, including the Chehalis, Chinook, Colville, Cowlitz, Duwamish, Ho, Jamestown Sklallam, Kalispel, Lower Elwha Clallam, Lummi, Makah, Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Nooksack, Port Gamble Sklallam, Puyallup, Quileute, Quinault, Samish, Soxweattle, Shoalwater Bay, Skokomish, Snoqualmie, Spokane, Squaxin Island, Stillaguamish, Suquamish, Swinomish, Tulalip, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Upper Skagit, and Yakima. We give thanks to elders both past and present, our Native and Indigenous colleagues, and the land itself. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is a space for you to submit questions to us. If time permits, we'll have about 10 minutes for questions after the panel discussion wraps up. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function or at info@educationvoters.org. And speaking of the chat function, you're welcome to use it to check in and comment on anything you hear. Welcome, Ananya, Andrea, Carey, Jacob, Aaron, Fernando, Pari, Soleil, Terry, and Ruben. We'll go ahead and start with Carey giving a quick overview of the legislative landscape, and then we'll kick it over to LIAC, and then we'll go to Building Changes, then Disability Rights Washington. After that, it'll be Communities for Our Colleges, the Council of Presidents, Children's Alliance, and then we'll wrap it up with the Independent Colleges of Washington. So Carey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. So I am a person that's in deep denial that Monday is the start of the 2026 legislative session, but this annual webinar is kind of a reality check for me that it's coming. It's going to be a budget year. It's 60 days. We're in the second year of the biennium, and it is a supplemental budget year. We're going into this with a deficit. The governor on the 23rd of December, very late, released his proposal, and this will be the blueprint that the legislature will use to build their budget. And both the House and Senate independently do their budgets, and they come together with the agreement. They negotiate that. There's a $2.3 billion shortfall in this budget. It's also a unique budget because we've been talking about, if you've been following the space, a much larger number. And that's because in the state of Washington, we're the only state in the United States that actually is required by statute to budget 4 years out. The governor's proposal actually is only a 2-year budget. So that $2.3 billion is only a deficit to finish off this biennium. And we were able to suspend that for a year because there was a couple of requirements. One, we were dependent on transferring money out of the budget stabilization account. And 2, we had less than 1% economic growth. And in fact, we had 0 economic growth in November. So that was why they're able to do just a 2-year budget. So it sounds a little bit better than what we thought we were going to be seeing, but it's still quite a huge hole. So he did make some changes, including that $1 billion transfer. And you might have also heard that in his release, he spoke about his support for a millionaire's tax, wealth tax. I want to be clear that, and he was clear as well, that this does not come into play until this will not affect this budget deficit. Even if it's passed, that money would not come into effect to help with this deficit. So there's a lot of legal loopholes and a lot of things that happen for that to go through. In the legislature, which is starting again on Monday, I better start packing. The Democrats still have control. So both our state executive and both the House and Senate are run by Democrats. 60-day session, a lot to be done. That's policy and budget, 3 budgets, capital, operating, and transportation. And they need to get that done. The Senate will not be taking any, because of the budget, the deficit, any budget requests from their members. There's not even a process to do that this year. The House has a lot more members that they have to actually manage, so there will be some action there. We'll see how that plays out between the 2 chambers. They are going to want to get done on time. It's going to be difficult, but it is a big campaign year. So not only will they be dealing with the budget, the decisions they make, both on policy and budget, are going to affect probably in their campaign. So they're going to be aware of those actions. And I also just want to say, for advocacy a sense of where you can get involved, they're going to make reductions. This is the first time a lot of these members have ever had to make reductions in their budget. That's just what's going to happen. We have to make sure we're communicating that there's a continuum in almost every area of government, and we're going to pay for reductions if we just do it in one area. If you do it up front, down the river, you're going to have to pay for those with increases in other programs to make up for not getting the services they got in the beginning. So make sure people are using their voice and talking about their programs on that continuum. So I'm here for any questions, and I tried to be really fast so people could speak a little bit longer about why they're here. So thanks for having me.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And each organization will have about 5 minutes to share any priorities. And if you have any additional analysis or landscape information that you'd like to share in addition to what Carey shared, feel free. So once again, we'll start with LIAC, the Washington State Youth Legislative Advisory Council. We'll then move on to Building Changes, then Disability Rights Washington, Communities for Our Colleges, the Washington State Council of Presidents, the Children's Alliance, and then finally Independent Colleges of Washington. So Puri and Ananya, you're next.
Hello. So, this year we started off our year in like August, and we kind of discussed what priorities we wanted to focus on, especially with the budget being so low. All of our bills that we are supporting and drafting, we made sure that they had a really low fiscal impact so that they had a higher chance of passing and impacting our students. So the first one, we went through a couple of drafts. One of them was related to AI privacy in schools, and then another one was related to giving credit to student translators in classes, like giving them CTE credit because it is a skill that would prepare you for high demand jobs. But these bills were more suited to be passed through OSPI directly rather than the legislature. So we decided to look through the pre-filed bills and communicate with a couple of different representatives on giving our input on how their bills are shaped and how different youth may be impacted, like giving them testimony, etc. And so far we have a bill related to voter registration, changing that date from January to September, like the National Voter Registration Day, so that social studies teachers and schools can shape curricula around voter registration and get that advertising out so that we can increase our youth voices and participation in elections. And then the other one is a couple of Orwell's bills. One of them is related to depiction of minors with AI deepfakes, like banning that and having strict regulations on that. And then another one of Senator Orwell's bills is related to creating survivor-centered policies for sexual harassment and assault. So both of these bills, like that Senator Orwell, it was brought last year, and we're just trying to bring it back this session and see what we can refine so that it has a higher likelihood of passing. And I'll have Ananya explain a couple other pre-filed bills that we are looking through right now.
Yeah, so as Pri mentioned, we're focusing on protecting youth from harm caused by AI systems, and then also another bill which is about strengthening early childhood education, which like gaps in learning and support, they don't start in high school and it's much earlier. So it's like one of the most effective ways is to promote that long-term equity. And then another bill, which is like expanding student representation on school boards, like she also mentioned, and which is basically the students are affected by these decisions because they're made in rooms where like students are involved, and so it's mainly decided by basically not the youth. And so that's why we're trying to believe that student voice leads to like better, more responsive policy, and that's why we're looking into more of that. And then also, like she said, voter registration access, like that's also something that we're closely tracking, like upcoming bills that might be coming related to voter registration and also including that into classes. And so it's basically our goal is to make sure that students are not just considered but also included in like the policy decisions and the students that are part of marginalized communities and ensuring equity. So.
And oh yeah, so Representative Simmons is actually going to drop the voter registration bill, I think this week, and then we'll hopefully get a committee hearing soon.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And Puri, while you're still here, because I know you have to go back to class, we do have a question, which is, does LIAC have a position on school cell phone ban policies? Have you taken a position on what to do with cell phones in schools?
Yeah, so when we meet in August, like we all share our different perspectives. Like we have youth from Spokane to like Bellingham. Like we have so many different youth with different perspectives, but we really try to dial in on like a certain few priorities because there's only so much that we can support. This year, we are not like explicitly supporting as like a our organization any cell phone ban legislation. However, on a personal note, I think yeah, cell phones are probably not the best at school and like definitely have an impact on mental health of students. But as like LIAC, we are not like as a group supporting cell phone ban legislation.
Great. Thanks so much for answering that. And Pri, feel free to leave whenever you need to, because I know you got to get back to class. But thank you so much for sharing your priorities. I really appreciate what you're focused on right now. Let's move on to
Thank you so
building
much.
changes. Yeah, you're most welcome. And Aaron, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to start off by saying a little bit more about Building Changes. We are a statewide nonprofit that works on combating homelessness at the intersections of the housing and education systems. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because, as I'm sure you're all aware, we've been dealing with quite a bit of chaos in the legislature, not just at the state level, but at the federal level as well, since last January. And more specifically, last 4th of July when HR 1 was first passed. We've been really trying to navigate the impacts of that bill and what kind of impacts they will have on our state. And that's also going to be a big conversation this legislative session, this upcoming legislative session. With that in mind, we've been thinking about specifically student homelessness and how the fact is that Washington State currently doesn't have independent law that guarantee protections for students to be able to continue to go to school, even if they are experiencing homelessness. That all of those protections are currently rooted in the federal McKinney-Vento Act. And that is an act, the program within the McKinney-Vento Act is housed within the Department of Education, which the Trump administration has been making efforts to deconstruct since they started. Their latest effort is to try to move the piece of the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is where the McKinney-Vento programs are housed, to the Department of Labor, which would cause a whole bunch of issues, legally speaking, because of the way the McKinney-Vento Act is written, designates specifically the Department of Education to carry out the responsibilities for the McKinney-Vento Act. So what happens if Congress doesn't amend that bill, that law, but that office is moved to the Department of Labor? These kinds of anxieties are all the more a reminder for why Washington State needs to have its own kind of independent protections. And that's why Building Changes has been working on a bill alongside Representative Tomiko Santos that would codify the McKinney-Vento Act within state law. And so that should their continued efforts succeed in either defunding McKinney-Vento outright or moving it so that it becomes inert, uh, Washington State would still have an obligation and a duty to continue to support homeless students within our state. With that in mind, there is also a program that is a state program, and it's the only one of its kind in the entire country, called the Homeless Student Stability Education Program. And what it does is it actually takes McKinney-Vento and completes the circle. McKinney-Vento makes sure that students are able to go to school and achieve an education, even if they're experiencing homelessness. The Homeless Student Stability Program makes sure that not only are they able to go to school, we also find them housing. We also make sure that they're able to achieve stability at home, because we have found that even when a student is doubled up or couch surfing, like not even if they're just outside without a roof over their heads in the way that the Department of Housing and Urban Development defines homelessness, they have the same educational, outcomes as their houseless peers. So essentially, it is the same thing. And what is critical for a student experiencing crisis is stability. That program was defunded during last legislative session. It had $5 million dedicated to OSPI. It was cut down to just 1.2 million. And not only that, it was only for the 25-26 school year. So if we did nothing this upcoming legislative session, that money would expire and there would be no funding for the rest of the biennium. So that's why we are also working on advocating for that money to be renewed this upcoming legislative session. Because if the McKinney-Vento Act were to be defunded or become inert, and the Homeless Student Stability Education Program were to be fully defunded, there would be no protections for students in Washington experiencing homelessness. And that's why both of those issues go hand in hand and why we are pursuing both of them. The good news is that through our advocacy work and our partners' advocacy work, Governor Ferguson did include that renewed funding in his budget. So that is, a huge first step. We are, almost halfway there, but the fight's not over yet. And so we need to continue pushing for it and making sure that the legislature carries that request to the finish line so that we can continue to give the support to our most vulnerable students when they need it most. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate it. Let's move on to Disability Rights Washington and Andrea.
Thank you, Eric. And like Aaron in building changes, we are concerned about the changes that are happening at the federal level with the Department of Education and the impact it will have on Washington State. There's a lot we could talk about this morning, but I think I'm going to keep my remarks sort of focused on the school to prison pipeline, both at the in the adult and youth service systems and in education, because that's where our focus has been at Disability Rights Washington. But you can hear there's a lot of really important work happening in education across the spectrum. So if you've worked with me, my focus at Disability Rights Washington is education. And specifically, we've been working on reducing and eliminating restraint and isolation in public schools. What you may not know is that every state and territory has an organization like Disability Rights Washington. So Congress established our agencies in the 70s to prevent abuse and neglect and protect the civil and human rights of people with disabilities. So I have colleagues from DRW in Olympia who are working hard on adult issues, in addition to what we do related to education. And I want to just briefly mention this because I've seen in my 26 years at DRW that education is really a microcosm of the adult disability service system, and many of the same issues we see in education continue into adulthood, and we see that specifically with the school to prison pipeline. And that's one of the reasons why education work is so important to many of us, because like you, I know that improvements in education improve the future for people with disabilities and for all of us. and help dismantle the school to prison pipeline. So I want to just mention our troop-led litigation, which arose because people with psychiatric disabilities were waiting indefinitely in jail to see if they were competent to stand trial, which is a constitutional right. And people were languishing in jail so long, waiting for competency evaluations and restoration services, that some of them actually committed suicide. So we settled with the state to improve that competency evaluation time. And we settled in 2019. But since that time, we've been working to include diversion services to keep people with mental illness out of the criminal system and to provide treatment alternatives to prosecution. And so this work continues. And right now we're working on ensuring housing and shelter for people with mental illness. Representative Strom Peterson has been leading these efforts, and Rep. Daria Barivar also has been working on this. And we have House Bill 1195, which we've been tracking. And we've also been working for years to eliminate solitary confinement in prisons. We will do work on this again this year. Last year it was House Bill 1137 that was introduced. And this work connects directly to the work we are doing to end isolation in schools, because adults who've been incarcerated often tell us that their first experience with solitary confinement was in school isolation rooms. So our most traumatized students are students who are homeless, who live in poverty, are in foster care, are Black and brown, and those with disabilities are the students who are restrained and isolated the most. And restraint and isolation are incredibly traumatizing and harmful to all involved. So we're re-traumatizing our most traumatized students, and they're being pushed out of school and into criminal systems and carceral settings. So we introduced legislation to eliminate isolation now for multiple years. Last year, we introduced House Bill 1795, which prevents isolation and restraint by creating strong support systems within schools that help educators meet student need long before crisis occurs. And this also provides continued funding for the demonstration schools. We have multiple school districts that are successfully eliminating isolation, dismantling isolation rooms, and reducing restraint. So this session, however, because of the fiscal constraints, we hope to just have a shorter policy that's cost neutral, that will ban chemical restraint, mechanical restraint, and prohibit restraints that interfere with breathing, because those are life-threatening. And students have died from asphyxiation in restraint holds. So we're going to look for flat or continued funding for the demonstration sites also. Our ultimate goal remains the elimination of isolation and preventing restraint use, and we're collaborating with the Washington Education Association, the Washington Association of School Administrators, and others to bring back broader policy in 2027 and beyond. What the demonstration sites tell us is that this work creates a more dignified school climate. It reduces suspension, expulsion, and absenteeism. It improves family engagement. It restores lost teacher time, and it improves student well-being and access to instruction. So happy to answer any questions or welcome anyone into the fold who wants to join these efforts. And thanks for your commitment, Eric, and bringing us all together in this space. And thanks everyone for your time today.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And thank you for what you shared. Just a quick question, Andrea, which is, do we have a bill number yet for the pared down cost neutral policy that we're looking at this session?
No, not yet. And Representative Santos is having a hearing on 1795 on Monday.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Okay. So the vehicle would
yeah.
be to amend 1795 so that it's less expensive.
Yeah, I think that's where we are.
Okay, great. And for more information about isolation and restraint, you can go to reducerestraint.org, and I'll drop that in the chat when I have a moment. Okay, we'll move on to higher education. And Fernando, what is Communities for Our Colleges focused on?
Yeah, thank you. So let me begin a little bit more with who Communities for Our Colleges is. So we began back in organizing back in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and one of the reasons why we wanted to work with community colleges and community college students was because when we, in the political discourse, when we talk about higher education, sometimes we definitely have the voices of community colleges, but we think we need to lift that up. And the reason why we believe in that is because when we talk about equity, when you just look at the numbers of who's attending higher education, many of our Washington students begin at community colleges. And as you all know, higher education has been historically underfunded, and that includes the community colleges. So we believe that community colleges definitely have a major role in helping us close equity gaps in higher education. One thing that I want to clarify about, our excitement about the work around community colleges is that many people tend to think that we are encouraging people to just go to community colleges. No, what we're saying is that we want to make sure that that system continues to be strengthened. And that is guided by principles of equity, justice, and economic justice, racial justice, and to that extent, it's able to help us gaps with our communities, and we believe that they can provide a really good bridge between the for those that are finishing high school going into higher education, it could be the bridge. Into four-year colleges too. So we don't see it as, mutually exclusive. But anyways, so that's a little bit about kind of our focus on the community colleges. In terms of the policy that we're going to be working on, I mean, like everyone, it's going to be a really challenging session because of the budget challenges that we're facing. But definitely one of the things that the conversation that we want to continue pushing is around you know, um, kind of the structure of funding, what are some of the revenue mechanisms. And so for that, we are going to be working with Representative Reed on a proposal, House Bill 2098. And one of the things that I would be doing, and it's kind of it's a continuation of one of the things that the state did this past year, but it basically is going to be looking into maybe lifting the cap on the B&O tax, the workforce and education investment searches, as a way to bring more revenue into that side of the system. And so again, we already have a proposal. We're hoping to have a hearing soon. We don't have a hearing yet, but that would be one of the proposals. I know there's a lot of other proposals out there that are basically looking into, what kind of revenue can we bring into the state so we can continue, making the investments that we need to be making in higher education. So that's one. The other one, as everyone knows, horrible things are having happening this week around immigration. And it's been increasing and escalating, and it's not going away. And definitely our communities are organizing, but our students and communities continue to be in fear. So to address some of those challenges, there's a couple proposals that we are planning to support. One is House Bill 2132 introduced by Representative Levitt, and it basically focuses on student financial aid protection. So one of the things that happened last year, there was data that was released to the federal government. So we want to make sure that our Washingtonians, and that includes the people that might not have documents, that their data is protected. And so that's one of the things that we're hoping to work on. The other one in the Senate, Senator Hansen is working on a similar proposal, and this one is focusing on establishing data and personal safety protections in public accommodations, and that's Senate Bill 5906, and it is also focusing on limiting the data collection specifically in relationship to immigration, but also restricting access to immigration enforcement. Many of our kids have not, our families are not taking their kids into school because they're afraid of ICE showing up. And they should be, because see what is happening in other places throughout the country, and it's happening here in Washington State. We have a lot of community members, students that have been targeted, that our own members have been targeted by ICE, and so we are very proud of the work that is happening here in Washington State, and we definitely commend the work that our elected officials are trying to do to create those kind of protections. The final piece that I'll elevate right now, which I think is going to be really difficult to move this year because of the budget, but in higher education, 1 in 5 students is a parenting student. Um, and that's coming from national data, but we don't really have we don't have much information here in Washington State. So one of the things that we're hoping to create is some sort of workforce committee, workforce like a committee, right, that is coming together to kind of collect the data and provide some sort of report to the state legislature that would help us get a better sense as to how many parenting students we have in Washington State. The goal behind that is that it definitely helps us when it comes to questions of equity, but at the same time, it can also help us make the case around the need to continue investing in childcare services. And so, yeah, so those are some of the things. I think similarly to many of you, we are trying to be creative about the challenges that are getting created at the federal level, and what can we do to protect our communities here in Washington State.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fernando. Yeah, and speaking of four-year universities, let's move on to the Washington State Council of Presidents. Ruben, what are your priorities this year?
Yeah, thank you so much. And really concur a lot with what Fernando said. It's a difficult time for higher education and the populations that we serve. For us, really supremely on our minds is the budget situation for our state. And like was already mentioned, the governor's budget has been released. And what it did was it showed a foundation or a blueprint that has additional cuts, really to across the board, but impactfully to higher education. Now, these are additional cuts on top of what we received already, across the board cuts to higher education in the biennial session last year. So we're talking about digging deeper into our institution's ability to serve students in the innovative ways that we have in the past, in the structural ways that we've had, and of course in the core ways around basic needs and all of those things that institutions of higher education have taken on as part of the services that the state provides to these populations. So we're definitely thinking about that and advocating for reductions in those. And part of the way that we advocate for how necessary institutions of higher education are in to the state, we are trying to edify the kind of work that we do around the basic needs space and the services that we provide to those who are experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, and a myriad of other issues, health-wise, mental health-wise, and of course, physical health-wise. And continue to do that across the board for students as they are on our institutions, Washingtonians as they are on our institutions, in the tens of thousands. So we want to continue that conversation with legislators who have a very difficult task in front of them, knowing that the budget is locked and there is not a lot of availability in funds. how they can create opportunities with the platforms that are in front of them. So definitely thinking about that. College going is the number one issue that I think is unifying all of our presidents in the public four-year sector. And it should. Washington ranks very low in the nation for college going. It is a paradox. We have the nation's best financial aid. We have a state that has more bachelor's degrees and higher level degrees than most other states in the nation. So how is it that we are at the very bottom of the nation in college going rates for our high school students? It does mean that we are importing a lot of those degreed people into our state instead of creating them within Washington. So, living within that paradox, our presidents are kind of keenly aware of the lay of the land that is Washington and our economic and our labor kind of workforce. All of those things are involved. How do we begin to turn the needle back to where it should be, where Washingtonians are seeing themselves in higher education, in community colleges, and in four-year institutions and beyond? So all of the policies that we're going to be seeing this legislative session, all those that have an impact in that college going rate are going to definitely rise high on the perspectives of our institutions. And we're going to definitely want to see how that we can play a role with those. And there are, like Fernando mentioned, a number of champions out there in higher education for legislators. And we're just so grateful for them that are taking on the mantle of higher education and championing it, even in a time of real famine as far as the budget is concerned. So just really grateful for all of that work that they're doing. And I'd also like to say there are so many partners that are not legislators. The communities for our colleges that's here today. Of course, ICW, Student Achievement Council. There's just a number of partners out there who are going to be using this session. The students themselves, who are the primary spoke people of higher education. So they're going to be rallying and they're going to be, shouting out that higher education is important. It is a game changer. And, we're just so grateful that we have those partners. We're so grateful for the League of Education Voters for giving us a sounding board, an opportunity to speak out on some of these issues and get that awareness out there. And hopefully, not only changing the minds of legislators and budget writers and all those who are involved about funding the work that we do in higher education, but also informing all of Washington about the value of higher education in a unique way, right? We've seen hundreds of articles literally across the nation and then within our own state that say college's tuition is more affordable than it has been in a decade. It's, I read something in the Atlantic just this morning. Across the nation, tuition is down about 20% when you incorporate the financial aid structures that are out there. And that doesn't even include inflation. Much more for Washington, who has the amazing Washington College Grant supporting those who need it most. So the more we can get that word out, I think the better we'll be in that college going culture battle that is in front of us. So just thankful again for all those partners and thank you for the opportunity to talk about those things.
Great. Well, thank you, Ruben. Really appreciate the work that you and the presidents do. We'll move to Children's Alliance and then Independent Colleges of Washington and then League of Education Voters. We'll round it out with Jacob there. Soleil, I know that early learning took a huge hit this year, last year in the legislative session. What are the priorities for early learning for 2026?
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and thanks everyone who came before me because you're teeing a lot of this up. Early learning has taken a hit. So while I was pleasantly surprised to hear about Governor Ferguson's support for a millionaire's tax during the the budget briefing, I was also disappointed at where many of the cuts are, of the $800 million in cuts. Almost a third of them are in early learning, which is really disproportionate considering only 7% of our population is young children. So we're seeing some really disproportionate impacts for early learning. And it's not that we don't have laws in place, it's that we don't have the same statutes in place, though, that, for example, exist in K-12, which make it a paramount responsibility of the state. Early learning does not have that standing. And so we often find ourselves in this place when budgets are being cut. This is an especially vulnerable part. And so we have to fight really hard every year for it. And then, and I hope though we can get some long-term change so we don't have to do that. So it's really a top priority for us this year. I'll just pause for a moment to say, hi, I'm Soleil, and at the Children's Alliance, we're really here because we envision a future where every child in Washington has an abundance of what they need to flourish, to thrive, to go to college, to go into those chosen professions. We really support the whole continuum of development, and have particular focus areas in early learning, in health equity, and in economic justice. So you'll hear me speak to those pieces, but everything I'm hearing today, I'm like, oh, how can we support and partner? And because this is all related and necessary at the same time. So within early learning, our priority has been to protect and preserve. And we have a job to do. Our two big concerns going into the session are about childcare subsidies. So these are dollars from the state to help families make childcare more affordable, not affordable, more affordable. And the average cost of infant care in our state, $20,000 a year, which is above, I know what I paid at the UW. I know that was a while ago, but it's extremely expensive, and it's cost prohibitive. It keeps people from working. It keeps people from advancing in their careers when they don't have the support they need. Also, it prevents children from getting access to that high quality care and education that we know sets them up for success in school, college, and beyond. So we know we need to work hard on this. So what is at stake here, though, is over $200 million in cuts to help parents pay for childcare. And what this will do is reduce the number of families who can access the subsidy by about 7,000 families. And that's maybe a little more than 10,000 kids who would otherwise have access to this resource and support, and with this cut would not have that access. These are predominantly low to middle income families who are really on that cusp of applying for or qualifying for many services. Many of them may be on that cusp around Medicaid, SNAP, work requirements, where reducing their access to childcare is really going to affect their ability to access other resources and reach those eligibility requirements. So it's really complicated by HR 1 and some of the impacts there, and more important than ever that we fight to not make that cut, but to do what we promised to do in the Fair Start for Kids Act, which is to expand access to early care and education to families who need it through the subsidy. Additionally, there are cuts to what is the subsidy rate. That's that dollar amount that the state gives to the childcare providers, the business owner, that helps them provide quality. So if we don't pay for quality, we expect people to do it for free. That typically comes out of their wages. Childcare providers make very little money. They're in the bottom 3% of occupations within our state. So when we don't pay that cost of quality, or when we don't pay at least that market rate, we hinder their ability to retain staff, to reach their credentials, and to provide the care that is needed to kids and families across the state. So these are really important issues. We're going to be working on protecting and preserving this funding, pushing against these cuts in early learning, and supporting a number of other issues in the early learning space. I'll drop our agenda in the chat so folks can read a bit more there. Additionally, health equity has long been a core part of the Children's Alliance, and so what we're focused on, particularly this year, is advancing a bill that would limit online addictive feeds. So limit tech companies' ability to keep young people hooked and literally releasing dopamine in their brains to stay on those apps. And it's not just young people, because I know we all do that. But we need to have a way to hold the tech companies accountable for the technologies they are using that are actively harming young people, and make the tech companies do the fix, not expect parents to do that or young people to monitor and reduce that behavior. So what we have is the Senate Bill 5708. This is Protect Washington Kids Online by Regulating Addictive Online Platforms, House Bill 1834. And so this is a bill we're really proud to be partnering with the Attorney General's office on, and hope to see it. It made a lot of progress last year, and we hope to see it cross the finish line this year. So please, check out a little bit more about that on our website. We'd love for folks to get engaged in that with us as well. Additionally, we are in support of kind of a broader picture piece, which is the Washington Thriving Children, Youth, and Behavioral Work Group and their Washington Thriving strategic plan. This is the plan that will coordinate providers, communities, legislators, really cross-sector plan around behavioral health. Washington State ranks 48th in the nation, not just for regressive revenue, but also for well-being of young people in terms of behavioral health. So we have a lot of work to do here, and we need a system to address these issues. We can't piecemeal it with one thing at a time. We really have to come together to coordinate that care. So this plan they've done the work, worked with stakeholders, worked with so many people. We need to codify this and say, we're committed. We want the governor to say, this is our strategic plan. We're committed to implementing it, and then put the resources behind to make sure that that can happen. So we can move out of that ranking. We also we're just working a lot to help lawmakers understand how those effects of HR 1, again, to Medicaid and SNAP really are impacting young people, children, and families, and make sure that we're putting laws or resources in place that help families maintain their eligibility, particularly to healthcare when parents stop participating in healthcare, maybe because there's more paperwork or there are more barriers they're encountering. That really has an impact not only on them, but their children are less likely to attend their well-child visits. So we really want to make sure we remove barriers and help folks get the healthcare they're actually still entitled to, but may not be pursuing because of fear around some of this documentation. And finally, economic justice. So we are in support of the wealth tax, the millionaire's tax. We are in support of a number of potential approaches to a more progressive revenues, approach from our state. And so we're working with Senator Frame, just thinking through some of those proposals. At the same time, I'll wrap it up, but we know we received a really incredible gift in a way from the Bomber Group. If it hasn't been mentioned here, but potentially $1 billion over the next 10 years to help some of the poorest children in our state access high quality early care and education. That's a good thing. They're literally paying for the law we already passed that we can't pay for yet. And we want to move to a place where we don't need billionaires to bail us out when they can. We want to be in a place where our systems, our laws, and our tax policy ensure we can pay for the policies we've already agreed on. So we're grateful, and we have work to do. And I would invite you to go to our website and join us. We'll be in Olympia on the 20th for Have a Heart for Kids Day. We welcome you, your families, everyone there to raise your voices on these issues. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Soleil. Really appreciate it. We'll definitely share out all the information that's been in the chat in the follow-up email. Great. Let's move on to Independent Colleges of Washington, back to higher ed. Terry, I see you've got stavestudenteg.org in your background there.
I do, and that's really, Eric, and thank you to all of my colleagues who are really focused on helping Washingtonians who are the furthest from opportunity. I want to draw some attention to some very inequitable cuts in our state's student financial aid programs that the legislature adopted last year. So these are cuts to the Washington College Grant, cuts to the College Bound Scholarship that will take away as much as 50% of student financial aid from students across Washington. And I dropped in the chat, 2/3 of the students who will see their aid cut are students of color, 65% identify as female, and 62% are first in their family to earn a degree. We're really part of a community effort to see those student financial aid dollars restored. And that's exactly for the reasons that Ruben really highlighted, that we've got to make progress and keep our promises to Washingtonians around the college going culture. So many of students have been planning toward college since middle school. And so this really is a broken promise. There is a bill, Senate Bill 5828. There is a hearing on this bill next Thursday at 1:30 that would restore these funds. And as listeners will know, we are fortunate that there is a revenue stream that comes to support higher education. The Workforce Education Investment Act account has student financial aid. It's one of its principal purposes. And so just wanted to lift up, make people aware of those cuts, make sure that folks know that there is a vehicle for us to share support. Because we do want Washingtonians to continue past high school. We know that that is the way to bend the curve of their family's trajectory towards economic justice. And I'll just leave it there so that we've got time to wrap up.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Carey. Really appreciate it. And again, I'll share the links to savestudentaid.org as well as Senate Bill 5828 in the follow-up email. All right, Jacob, what are the priorities for League of Education voters? And then after that, Ananya, as a student, feel free to share any final thoughts or reflections on what you've been hearing.
Thank you. Just a quick summation. One, we'll be working with a lot of the partners that have already shared today. As they work to further some of the bills that they've discussed, from isolation and restraint to supporting students experiencing homelessness. An additional area that hasn't come up yet is an area around making sure that as school districts are encountering some challenging fiscal budget situations, that as we look to address it at the state level, we have to really put equity first, and making sure that whatever approaches to address the immediate challenge that districts and students are facing and communities are facing, we do it with an eye towards equity and really making sure we support students furthest from educational justice, and making sure that there's equity built into whatever solutions that we put forward. And one an additional quick thread that I wanted to mention is that of all the priorities that have been shared so far, there's been some themes that have come up. One of those, whether it's early learning, through some of the cuts to ECAP in last budget cycle, through reductions in things such as the Homeless Student Stability program support program, or the cuts to higher ed. We've seen cuts across the continuum last budget cycle, and there's been some proposed already across the continuum as well. I think one thing that it's important to acknowledge is the fact that this isn't three different systems. It's one education continuum. It's different parts of one system. So as we disinvest from early learning, you're going to see impacts to the K-12 system. As we disinvest from the K-12 system, you're going to see impacts in the higher education system. So we really have to kind of take a step back as a state as we approach this session to make sure that we recognize the fact that this is one system, that a student's journey starts at one point, ends at one point. So these as these cuts are proposed, we really have to understand the long-term implications of these cuts. And to really approach this as, if we care about education, we have to protect the whole continuum. It's not just one part, it's the whole system. So we'll be working with partners during the course of the session to really reaffirm that value and that need, and provide some advocacy opportunities going forward around that theme.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jacob. I appreciate you sharing. All right, Ananya, do you have any final thoughts about either what you've heard or just in general that you'd like to share?
Well, So as some people were talking about, like the recent cuts to the Washington College grant and the college bound scholarship, I feel like these impacts and the funding reductions that have with students with disabilities and other students who rely on most of these support systems. And as a student, it's hard to hear that access to education and support might be slipping further out of reach for the very communities that already face those big barriers. And it's especially concerning to me when we think about mental health, because for many students and like school-based counselors, social workers, and support staff, like that's they're their only access to mental health care. And so I'd like to pose a question, because for me personally, mental health is something that seems like an optional barrier for many, like budget cuts, and it's something that's optional, not like a priority. And so, like, as the legislature navigates like these budget constraints, how do we ensure that mental health services and disability supports are protected and not treated as optional, especially for students who are already at risk?
Yeah, that is a great question. And we, as League of Education Voters, completely agree with you. Mental health needs to be a priority, definitely now and continuing. Great. Well, Ananya and Puri, who was here earlier, Aaron, Andrea, Fernando, Ruben, Soleil, Terry, Carey, and Jacob, thank you all for being here. Really appreciate everyone who is here in the audience for participating, also submitting questions. Our next webinar will likely focus on an upcoming report by the Learning Policy Institute that spotlights Washington State supports for students experiencing homelessness. We're working to finalize the date and the panel, and we'll share information about registration on our website and on our social media channels. Our website, educationvoters.org, we'll have it on the events page, and then just go to lunchtime webinars. Spanish interpretation and English closed captioning will be available. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to me at Eric, A-R-I-K, at educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website and will be sent to you in the follow-up email to today's webinar, which you should receive in about 24 hours. We'll also include links to all of the websites for our partner organizations here, as well as all of the bills and events that were mentioned in today's webinar. Please share this recording with your friends and colleagues. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website, educationvoters.org. Thank you again for attending. Each one of us has the right to feel safe and valued. Together, we will fight for a world in which true educational and economic equity exists. We look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Ananya, Puri, Aaron, Andrea, Fernando, Ruben, Soleil, Terry, Carey, and Jacob, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for all you do for Washington students, families, and educators, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.